interview.
Okay. In the story Alice in Wonderland, Alice follows a rabbit and goes into and gets sucked into a whole new other world where there's crazy imaginary cats, a crazy Mad Hatter, and a ruthless queen that rules over the land. The object I have brought today is a book, and this book I've had it for many long years. That's why it's very worn out, but it's very precious to me because it was the first book that actually got me into the whole reading culture. By me talking about this book, you'll have a bit more of an insight in the reading culture, which I will later on talk about how I identify myself with this culture. Books have been in our history for many, many, many years, and there's different types of books. There's books that people read for information. There's books that people read for entertainment, which is one of the reasons I read for. Books are basically pages held together that contain either written words or pictures that tell a story. It's either about someone's story or some make-believe land that has happened in someone's mind. These words trigger your imagination to see into a different person's perspective and see how they view the world. And in this book, Twilight, if no one knows what Twilight's about, Stephanie Meyer writes about a girl who goes into a small city or small town where there's vampires. She falls in love with one, and she gets sucked into the world of the supernatural. What I liked about the book here is that there's so many books out there that have the main general topic of vampires, but in hers, they sparkle. In others, they're ugly creatures who live only in the night, don't come out in the dark, they live in coffins, and they're basically people who no one wants to associate with. But in my culture, people like to read these books to have like a stress reliever. They like to get out of reality. It's a different way for them to be. I'm tired of like school or work, so I'd rather just sit down, relax, read a book, and just enjoy the written words of someone else's perspective. Some typical traits of people who like to read would be that they're creative. They get inspired by the written words from another person. They're very patient, like books that are really long, like Twilight or Harry Potter, that have 7 books in the series. They're patient enough to read it because they're very involved with it. They're very honest because if they don't like something, they're gonna tell you and say, I don't like this, and this needs to be changed. They're very crazy, especially on fandoms, that each book has their own fandom, and if you disrespect that book, they're gonna get really mad and they're gonna uprise. Why I identify myself with this culture is it's very stress relieving and it's a hobby for me. I feel very, very comfortable reading, and it's just something that not a lot of people do, and most people find it very boring, but I find it very adventurous. It's like my own little movie in my head whenever I read a book, instead of going to the movies and then seeing it and just saying, oh, that's not how it was supposed to be, that's not how I looked at it in my head. With this culture, people, like I mentioned before, don't like some parts of the book, so there's websites called like fanfiction.net, then there's Tumblr, there's Wattpad, there's Quoted, there's many of these sites where they get these ideas and make their own stories. I like to read these stories and give feedback to these people because these books triggered something in their mind that wanted them to write about this. And I go and read, and they're really, really good. And it's something that they're passionate about. They read and read and read to get more ideas to write about. Those were my main points, were that books are something that has been in our history and always will be. Even if they're not longer paperback, they're electronic, but they're always going to be there. We've learned from books, like I said, history and entertainment. And then I also reviewed of how I identify myself with this culture. and why it's important to me. So hopefully, from what I said, you have gained some insight on what the reading culture is about. So books, there's TVs, video games, movies that show you about a different other world. But books are uses your imagination to portray imagination, and you decide to portray through the written words what happened, not what the author wants you. You get to decide. She just explains it, but you decide on what goes on in these written words.